For this afternoon and tonight, a significant winter storm, including heavy snow with limited trainings.
Hello, and welcome to the Snow Brains Podcast, where it's my job to interview the most intelligent people in the snow sports industry and pass their fascinating knowledge onto you, our listeners. I'm your host, Miles Clark. I'm a professional free skier, a professional mountain guide, a UC Berkeley molecular cell biology graduate, the founder and CEO of Snow Brains, and I drank way too much and ended up peeing in the corner at senior prom in high school. Yeah, I was that guy. The Snow Brains podcast is brought to you by Alta Ski Area. Alta averages 40 snow events every winter, with 18 of those storms bringing at least a foot of snow to Alta. This is part 2 of Andrew McLean, the big mountain scientist. We pick up where we left off in phase 6 of Andrew McLean's exotic life. So stage 6 of your life here that I have as I've categorized your life for you is something I had no idea that you did. And again, this is another thing that pisses me off because every time I'm out with you hiding, it's like, Andrew can just go and go. He's like, yeah, I'll take your clients. I'll do another run. Yeah, you go back, have some coffee. Yeah, you look tired. I'll go. And now I understand why, because you were into ski mountaineering races. This was just part of your physiology. So your background of winning numerous ski mountaineering races in the 90s and 2000s blows me away because I know how difficult those races are and how intense that competition is. You won the Alaskan Pipeline Raid. You won the Randonnée Rally at Alpental, Washington twice. You won the Sudan Couloir Ski Race Extreme in Whistler. You won the Peak to Valley Ski Race in Whistler. And you won the Groundhog's Day Telemark Ski Race at Alta. What the hell, man? Nobody knows this about you. How did these races change the direction of your life? And how did it feel to win?
Oh, it was great. Now, a big part of it was the early development of the sport. And I'd been over to Le Grave, France, and I'd seen like a result sheet from a randonnée race, and I was looking through it, and the times were, it was like, okay, these guys climbed, I think it was like 6,000 feet of climbing, and the times were like an hour and a half or something.
Whoa.
And I was like, really? So it kind of opened my eyes to this whole idea of racing, and so I brought that back, and with Black Diamond, we started putting on the thing called the Powder Keg, which was one of the early backcountry races. And, then we made it into a World Cup event, brought over a bunch of Europeans. I think the Powder Keg's it's been going every year. I was involved with it for about the first 5 years, and now other people have taken it over. But it was really fun at the time because, it was just this community event. You'd have, 20 people show up, and it was all very loose, and there weren't trails broken, and it was just community. And then as it started to catch on, it got a lot more competitive. But I've met a lot of really fun, great, fast skiers. Ethan Pringle from Crested Butte, and just a lot of people from Jackson. Steve Romeo. Met a lot of people through the ski mountaineering racing. And then I was on very heavy equipment because I was like, you want to ski steep stuff, you got to have really heavy equipment. And for racing, I started using some Dynafits, which, just seemed like little pieces of jewelry. They're little teeny things. Like, you can't take these seriously. And then, I started using them. I was like, oh, these things are rad. And then, it just kind of went from there. Suddenly you start seeing that, 3,000 feet on this lightweight gear is just nothing. You can just dust it off in an hour. And so suddenly your tours, racing was one thing by itself, but then you could apply that to your touring, and you could start pumping out 6,000 foot days or 9,000 foot days, and just more and more vertical through this lighter gear.
I can attest to that too, because I'm a late adopter. I really only started using Dynafits in the last couple of years, and it is mind bending. You're about twice as fast, I'd say.
Yeah, you'll never go back.
No. Well, I'm still dumb enough because when I think I want to ski hard, I still have my beefy setup because I think I'm tough. Yeah. But then when I know we're just out here to get a long distance done, or the conditions aren't it's springtime or whatever, then I got the Dynafits, and it's amazing. Yeah. Well, that's so interesting. Did you also do a 100-mile running race?
Yeah, the Wasatch 100, which kind of goes right through my backyard. So I did paced a friend on it one year and kind of went from checkpoint to checkpoint, saw the whole thing. And, it wasn't really running. It was more just like suffering and enduring, which is kind of my forte. So I was like, oh, I'm going to sign up for that. So I did, and I got in the next year, much to my horror. I'd never run a marathon I'd never done anything over like, I don't know, 10, 15 miles. But it was almost more like a horizontal expedition, a lot of planning and pacing. And, I made it to, I think, mile 75, and I was in pretty bad shape, but I was like, I'm going to finish this thing. So I finished it. Wow. And quit running after that. That's what kept me going, was the idea of, if I finish, that'll be the end of it.
Well, it's incredible because it looks like you weren't a runner. You did this 100-mile race, and you got, what I read is you got 36 out of 180 people.
Yeah, about like that.
I
think it was 28 hours, but a lot of vertical. I think it was 22,000 feet of vertical or something.
Whoa, I can't even imagine that. It's all starting to make sense now, Andrew, your behavior pattern in the mountains. All right. So stage number 7, you were an avalanche forecaster. The list goes on. So you were an avalanche forecaster for the Utah Avalanche Center for 1 year in 2003 and 2004. What was that experience like, and why did you not continue with that career direction?
It was fantastic. Started doing a lot more expeditions. And so I'd come back, from a trip and be at Black Diamond, and, I was like, oh yeah, by the way, now that I'm back, I've got another trip planned. So At some point they were like, you need to decide, one thing or the other. So I was like, well, okay, I'm going to take a break, because then the sponsorship was kind of taking off, and there was an opening for avalanche forecaster at the Utah Avalanche Forecast Center, and I applied and ended up getting the job and working with Bruce Tremper, which was great. Yeah, so I learned a lot from him, Drew Hardesty, Greg Gordon. Yeah, it was great. It was really fun being part of the community, because you're working with all of the backcountry skiing community in Salt Lake, and all the ski resorts would call in. And, I learned a lot about avalanche terminology and forecasting, which is much different. Like, when we usually go out skiing, we're kind of now casting, we're, going out reacting to the day. But forecasting, you really have to, look at the day and then look at, what the weather is going to be like, and make a forecast. Like, this is what it's going to be like tomorrow. You had to wake up super early. You had to be there at 4 a.m.
Whoa. Well, it sounds like that served you well, obviously. And why did you not continue that career?
It was a little bit of velvet handcuffs. Like, you had to be there every day. It was such a small group of people that if, to go on an expedition meant that, one of these people was going to have to, cover for you the whole time. And that's pretty hard when you only have 4 people and you're waking up at 2:30 in the morning. If you have 4 people and everybody rotates, you do that. You do your field day and you're at forecasting day. But if somebody's gone, that just means you have to really double up, and it made it a lot harder to go on trips.
So forecaster or professional ski mountaineer, I see where your decision making went. So number 8 here of your amazing life stages I have is professional ski mountaineer.
Yeah, that's right. It happened right after forecasting.
It kind of makes sense, right? So you touched on this before, but how did you become one of the first professional ski mountaineers? And when did this start?
Yeah, I don't know. It wasn't like a really cut and dry thing. It just, slowly evolved. And, part of it was, I think the North Face started one of the first climbing teams. So they had Lynn Hill, Greg Child, Alex Lowe, and Conrad was the team manager. So
Conrad Anker
worked for the North Face. So they started an actual climbing team, but there was no, real skiing team. But then skiing really started to take off. And so some of these companies like, North Face, and in my case, Mountain Hardwear, started looking at having skiing teams. And skiing had been, up to that point, had been, racing and freestyle and maybe some modeling or something like that. Backcountry was like a new thing. So when the company started making backcountry specific clothing, they started putting together, backcountry athlete programs. And so I was just lucky enough to, first through Black Diamond, because I was working there, then through Scarpa, and then through Mountain Hardwear. So those 3 companies kind of were the mainstay that kind of got me going.
That's amazing. So where did professional skiing take you, and what opportunities did it afford you?
It was just a blast, and still is. It was,
It looks like it.
because it was, and it's changed quite a bit. A big part of what it used to be was you go on an expedition and you'd bring along a photographer, and the expedition would be paid for. And the idea was that you would, take photos and test the product, and then the photos would be used for advertising, and then you would go and give slideshows and presentations. And if there was a clinic, you'd, teach the clinic and, do writing. So it was really kind of a package deal, speaking. And now, a lot of that has been replaced with social media now. So, the whole idea of nobody does slideshows anymore. It's like a dying art. But, that's where you kind of learn to, stand up in front of people and put together a show and talk about it, develop a story, and you travel around, go to ski towns, talk about skiing, and meet a lot of other people and have a good time.
Well, that's the first time I ever met you. Is I know you don't remember, but I think it was somewhere. I was around 24. I think it was around 2005 or so, 2006, and you gave a talk at SQUA, and I watched your talk, and I went and harassed you later after the show and asked you questions. It was about Alaska, and it totally inspired me. So I miss that. We still have some of that, but I do miss that. And it's neat to hear that's the protocol and that's how it worked. You went on these trips, you brought a photographer, you gave talks, and that's how you promoted that business. And then the business obviously supported you. Which other ski mountaineers do you look up to?
Lou Dawson was a big mentor. Alex Lowe, absolutely. He was much more known for his, climbing, but, he's the guy that really turned me on to the idea of combining climbing and skiing, bringing ropes and technical gear into the backcountry. Instead of waiting 20 years for a line to fill in, he would be like, oh, let's go do it now and we'll just wrap it. Wow, what a radical idea. I never thought of that. So, there's a lot. Greg Hill, I'm a big fan of Greg Hill.
Me too.
Canada, just super nice, genuine, incredibly strong, a great human outside of skiing. See, the early French extreme skiers, Anselm Baud, and, Bovan, Tardeville, the original kind of steep extreme ski guys. I never met any of them, but they were obviously, their photos were kind of like, oh, check that out.
In 2010, I interviewed Anselm Baud and Sylvain Soudan in Chamonix for a project back then. Yeah. And they both were just phenomenal. And the essence that Anselm Baud brought to the table, his just class and the way he moved, it was like, I don't know, this like just suave cat, everything he did is very, very cool. And then Sylvain is more like, this stocky grunt guy. You can tell he's just muscling his way through things. But both of them just vibrant, older gentlemen. I was very impressed. This is a little bit out of order, but I wanted to get to the Chuting Gallery, which I have as phase 9 of your life. In 1998, you published the legendary guidebook, The Chuting Gallery, a guide to steep skiing in the Wasatch Mountains. And this book simultaneously displays the most challenging lines in the Wasatch Mountains and is objectively hilarious and witty. I've read this book, like I told you, on the toilet so many different times. And it just makes me laugh. So just even the captions, the guy on the cover is doing the weirdest thing. And then the caption's something like, this is how you drop into the sliver with every limb doing a different thing. And it's just, I always thought, why is this how you're supposed to do it? But then I learned that the whole book is kind of joking. And it kind of is, right? At least to me, it makes me laugh so many times. What drove you to write this book?
Yeah, as I was mentioning earlier, after that friend said, you skied the 3 big lines in the Wasatch, I was like, oh, there are plenty more. So I started to, I was always a rock climber. So, rock climbing has ratings to it and a star system. And so it's like, oh, that's, I'm going to climb these things and ski them. And, obviously some are better than others. And I'm going to give them a quality star rating. And some are harder than others, so I'm going to give them a difficulty rating. I thought it was going to be originally like a 8.5 by 11 Xeroxed, folded in half and stapled, and I'd be like, here, Miles, here it is, and I just hand them out, and it was never really intended to be like an actual book. And I kept thinking I was going to run out of couloirs, so it'd be like, I got it, one more. All of a sudden, I'd worked on it for maybe 2 years. And I was like, okay, this is enough. I'm going to publish it. So I went to fold it and staple it, but it was too big. Like I couldn't do it. So I had to go to what's called perfect binding, which is how paperback novels are made, which meant that instead of doing 20 at a time, I had to go have them manufactured.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily, Utah or Salt Lake just has a ton of publishing houses because of the LDS Church. They do
Interesting.
a ton of publishing. So there was a place downtown that would publish it, but it was like, well, you have to do 4,000. I was like, oh. I was like, but by then, I'd put so much time and effort into it. And so when I went and picked them up, I was just like, oh, I'm just going to, I'm going to sell 30 of these and I'm going to burn them all. And it's going to be a huge embarrassment because I talked to, some other like Wolverine Press and Chalkstone Press. And they were like, no, nobody wants that type of book. Nobody does that type of skiing. And I was like, I know, I know. Yeah, nobody does.
Can't argue.
I get it, but I was committed. So I was just like, all right, I'm going to take the plunge. And I made them, and I take them around, and, stores were kind of like, nah, nobody wants those, but we'll take 2. And then I'd get home and there would be a message on the machine being like, yeah, we'll take 2 more. The employees bought them. And then, okay, we'll take 2 more. We'll take 1 more. We'll take 2 more. And it's just like, so anyway, they kind of, it just started catching on. And, I think a big part of it was that, people wanted to get into backcountry skiing, but at the time, backcountry skiing was really kind of an extension of cross country. It was like Nordic skiing on logging roads and tree hugging and telegear and, crashing. And, suddenly people were just like, oh, this is the type of skiing I want to do. I want to go in the backcountry and ski steep lines. I'm an expert skier at the Alta or Snowbird or wherever. And, I want something that's beyond that. The style of the writing came about because I just, never really expected it to be like a real book. It's just going to be like, it's just going to be like, here, Miles, here's this, here's this book you can read on the toilet and get a laugh out of, that type of thing.
And now it's this legendary Bible of the Wasatch that you literally can't live in that area, be a backcountry skier and not have this book. How many of these do you think you've sold over the years?
I don't know. I haven't kept track. I just, I think it's maybe the 3rd or 4th printing or something like that, and it kind of depends. It comes and goes. What's really caught on now is, people are completing the whole series. And so I think there's like an interest because there's 92 lines or 94 or something in there.
How many have completed it?
I think it's up to about 7 or 8.
Whoa. Wow.
People. So.
How long did it take to write the book?
I'd go skiing and then I'd write it up and go skiing and write it up. So I'd say all told, it was 2 years, but, it wasn't like I was working on it nonstop for 2 years. I'd, work on it, pick on it a little bit here and pick on it a little bit there and put together some photos. And I also did all the layout. So I used an old Adobe program called PageMaker. I don't know if it even exists anymore. So, I had to learn PageMaker and then I had to, figure out all the formatting and do all of that. So it was more just like a evening beer drinking project for a couple of years.
That you wrote this amazing legendary Bible in only 2 years and just, very, very part-time is phenomenal. And have you skied all the lines in the book?
I did. See, Noah Howell, there was a second person to ski them all, and it hadn't really occurred to me to ski them all. I hadn't done the Joe Ketty's ribbon. I'd done all of them except for Joe Ketty's ribbon. And then when Noah mentioned he was going to ski them all, I was like, oh, I better go snag that one.
So you were the first.
I was the first.
We were the first.
I felt like I had to be, If I was the author of the book, I should at least have skied them all. So. That's
impressive. I will definitely not ski them all, Andrew. This is amazing. But I do want to ski one of these with you maybe this winter because you gave me a hard time. Like, oh, yeah, it's cool you're skiing them in the spring, buddy, but you got to ski them in POW. When we talked last year. Have you gotten negative feedback about exposing the secret lines of the Wasatch?
Yeah, I did in the beginning, but, it was very select. It was like, people were like, oh, you gave away all the secrets. It was like, well, like what? Like, oh, south face of Superior. It was like, oh, come on.
It's
like it's right there. You just looking at it, the Y Couloir, the Wolverine Cirque. It was like, so, these lines that, I didn't do any history on them like a lot of climbing and skiing books have, first ascent, because, the Wasatch, it's just people come and go. So, I'm not really claiming to do first ascents of any of them. I wouldn't doubt if they'd all been skied at one point or another before I got there. So that's why there's no like history on them. There is on a few of them, like, who is an early descender, but it's too hard. The Wasatch is very different in that, the Tetons there's a big sense of history. And when somebody skis something, people know the history of the lines and they know this and they stay in the town of Jackson. And, in the Wasatch, it's just Salt Lake is so big that people come and go, and, there's no real central meeting spot or no central repository of information.
I love how it's so brief and flippant on the descriptions and just comical and almost always discouraging you from skiing it if you think it's a gnarly line. I love that. And have you gotten negative feedback about writing the book about the lines being too dangerous?
No.
That's
yeah,
good.
I mean, some people have kind of grumbled about, the northeast face of the Pfeiffer horn. That's pretty spicy. And Joe Ketty's is, it's almost more of a rock climbing line. It's a lot of gear setting, and conceivably it could be done someday without a rope. I mean, you'd have to have perfect conditions and really, really strong testosterone or whatever it would take.
Right. Really big guts.
Yes, to ski it. And, the Great White Icicle, that was, we first skied that because it went up one year and we were ice climbing it, and it was so filled in that it was kind of like, wow, this thing is conceivably skiable. And I haven't seen it that filled in since then, but it's the same thing. I think with, a really big year and the right person, I don't know, maybe someday it'll be skied. But, people kind of grumble about it, but I think they have a good time. If you ski the Great White Icicle, the skiing's not great, but it's hard not to get a smile out of how ridiculous it is and what a great location you're in.
For reference, that is pretty much a roped ski descent and more or less, like Andrew's saying, an ice climb. Another line you won't find me on. And so to amplify the flippant nature of these descriptions, I'm going to just read a couple quotes from the book that I think are phenomenal. So I love that the Chuting Gallery book begins with a disclaimer from your mom saying
3 disclaimers.
3 disclaimers. I love it. So this one from your mom: the fact that this is a guidebook does not mean that you, the reader, should take it seriously. Obviously, no one in the right mind would ski this stuff, and you shouldn't either. That's so good. And the northeast couloir of the Pfeiffer horn: more fun than running with scissors, sticking paper clips into electrical sockets, or taping firecrackers to a cat's tail. And then I can't say coquetties or the ribbon at Alta. Bring a spare pair of underwear, a likely candidate for the most outrageous inbound ski line in the U.S., and an excellent way to get to know some of the Alta Ski Patrol on a first-name basis. And then Medusa's face: like Russian roulette, more fun to watch than to play. That one just gets me. So we'll move on. So another phase of your life, maybe this is throughout a lot of your life. Talk to us about your avalanche philosophy, because it's different.
I kind of learned about avalanches, or was first exposed to them in the Seattle area. And, they were, maritime, so they're slow, or they tend to be slow. And, you'd see an avalanche and you'd be like, oh, here comes an avalanche. We better ski out of the way. And you could, stand on the edge and watch them kind of slide by. So I kind of took that attitude to the Wasatch when I first started backcountry skiing here. And, the first year we just had, endless close calls because, soft slab avalanche is much faster and much trickier than a slow maritime one. And then, hard slabs like Colorado are, even a step beyond that as far as, being hard to predict and tricky. I ended up having a couple of close calls with Alex Lowe, and then, triggering slides or going for little rides, and, kind of like, it's like, wow, what was that? Just totally clueless. And so, I took avalanche class, avalanche level 1, and then, level 2, and then level 3, and then eventually got into, forecasting. So, I've been, pushing my education as much as I can, reading about avalanches and, being involved and following the forecast.
And is it true? Yeah. Sometimes you and I think have spoke. Sometimes you won't carry a probe because you think that once you find the person with your beacon, you should just start digging.
Yeah, I know that's not a very popular. Because in the early days, probes weren't part of the kit. You'd have a beacon and a shovel.
Mhm.
And the one avalanche, the first one, fatality I was involved with, we didn't have a probe. And, we just all started digging right away, which was good. And we ended up probing just with the ski pole, just turned it over and probed. And, I think it is important to, start digging as soon as possible. Once you get a good signal, you start digging. And, modern beacons, go down to half a meter so you can get, really close, tell how deep they are and see where people are, get an idea. And a lot of people carry probes nowadays. I carry a probe when I go to Antarctica or when I'm guiding. But, a lot of times I just ski with, maybe 2-3 people at the most, like smaller groups. And, if you have a group of 3 or 4, then somebody can do the beacon, somebody can start digging, somebody can start probing. In those cases, I think a probe is a really good idea. But for a lot of the skiing I do, it's just, hey, I realize it's, not everybody's cup of tea, but you got to, at some point you have to start making decisions. Are you going to bring an airbag pack? Are you going to bring a radio? Are you going to bring, your cell phone? Are you going to file a trip plan? And everybody has different levels of backcountry comfort. And for me, the probe is kind of on the cutting edge. I'm comfortable skiing without a probe, not all the time, but more often than not, I'll ski without a probe or an airbag. I've got an airbag, but when I go out, I'll be like, well, it's really dicey conditions. I'll bring my airbag pack. And then as I'm pulling it down, I'm like, well, if it's dicey conditions, why don't I just stick to safer terrain? Because it's kind of giving me, I'm the first to admit, if I'm wearing it, I'm Superman. It's like, I'll ski this. If it rips loose, I'll just pop the chute and it'll be fine. And that's not a good way to be. So, if I start to reach for the airbag pack, I just instead change my agenda. It's like, let's just tone it down and ski safer line today rather than putting on an airbag and committing to a steeper, more exposed line.
I hope that's something that resonates with our listeners, because I agree. I actually stopped using my airbag backpack because I think it was pushing me into more aggressive terrain and more dangerous avalanche conditions. And I've recently, I think part of, I'm getting older now, just maybe making better decisions. And so now I do use it more often now, but I agree. I feel like I reach up for the pack when I think I'm pushing it. And then you have to think, maybe I should just not be pushing it. There's a simpler solution here, right? Yeah. Yeah. Right.
I ski with it. Like, we did a trip with Bill Barker to Gulmarg, and that's kind of perfect airbag because you're taking the tram up and you're skiing these huge exposed lines with no hiding spots. There's no trees, there's no cliffs or rocks to hide behind. You're just digging pits, checking it out, and then you're committing to these 3,000 foot open slopes. And that's kind of perfect airbag scenario. If you do get caught, you pop the bag and you'll hopefully float on top. But, around the Wasatch lot, you can ski strategically. You can ski off to the side, or maybe not center punch stuff, or stay on a ridge line, or hide between islands of safety, go into the trees, things like that.
It's another great take home is there's so many more strategies than just the things you read about in books. A lot of times, a lot of it does come from experience. So I think those are those little strategies of how to manage, that kind of avalanche terrain. That stuff is so valuable. Let's move on to another huge phase of your life, expedition skiing. And I think this has been going on for about 30 years for you. You've been on expeditions to places in the world most people would never even think of going, to Iran, to Antarctica, Svalbard, Baffin Island, Morocco, many trips to Alaska, Iceland, and lots of these trips contain first ascents. What is it about expedition skiing that calls to you?
I just love the planning and the logistics. Like, you think about it and you plan it out and you research it and you find a partner and you get any permits and you do all this work and you think of all these scenarios. How's this going to happen? What are we going to need for food? Who do we need to, and then you get it all set and you kind of launch, and then the trips kind of play out, and then you're kind of like jazz. You're freelancing. Sometimes plan A works. There's a lot of times it's plan A, plan B, plan C. You're just going all over the place, making the best of it. Plans are changing. This doesn't work. That doesn't work. And it's just I really like the bigger picture skiing. It's about skiing, and you go there for the skiing wherever it is. But in the end, it's really, it's a bigger adventure. It's a way to explore the world through skiing, or, using skiing as a way to explore some of the hidden parts of the world that, maybe haven't never been explored before. Oceans have been sailed and people have gone to outer space, but, there's some little line up in Alaska that's, worth checking out. Could be great skiing. Might as well go launch a little expedition up there and, get a group of friends and make a base camp, check it out. It's a good excuse to go to these places and meet people and have a good time.
Yeah, I think that you have seen the world through a lens that almost nobody has gotten to see it through. You end up in big cities and crazy places and interesting cultures, and you don't speak the language, and you get these phenomenal cultural experiences that you would have never gotten. And it's skiing that got you there, which I think is so fascinating. And a lot of times on these trips, Andrew, I know you're going there to ski something steep, right? You're going there to ski something gnarly. What do you think? What's the gnarliest line you've skied on a ski expedition that scared you?
Boy, quite a few of them.
I bet.
Let's see. The first one that really got me going on it was Denali, and that was with Mark Holbrook, and we went to a climbing slideshow about Denali, and it was like, can you ski that thing? And it was like, oh yeah. So Mark and I just went there, and we totally lucked out and ended up skiing it on our first try. And so that one was kind of like, wow, if we could ski this, then we can go anywhere and ski anything. And that was kind of a stretch of the imagination. That kind of thinking led to Shishapangma, where that's in Tibet, where Alex Lowe and Dave Bridges were killed in an avalanche. But it was that was definitely the first one that kind of opened my eyes to, if you could ski this, then there's just all of the volcanoes. There's stuff in Russia, there's stuff in Baffin Island, there's lines all over the world.
Well, that's so sad about Alex and David and Shishkamamga. I did not say that right. But I love the idea that you guys went and skied Denali, and I think you skied the Messner Couloir. Is that right? And you were the first ones to ever ski that. And
we skied the Messner.
The Messner. Yeah.
I think we were technically the first Americans, but it had been skied before.
So you went and skied the Messner, and that gave you the confidence. If we can ski this, we can ski anything. And then since then you've just gone all over the world. So another big phase of your life is steep skiing, which is kind of rolled up into all this. We can do this quick, but what is it about steep skiing that makes you crazy?
I really like how it's like almost 100% mental. Like when I steep ski, you just have to be thinking, I've made millions and millions of turns in my life. I'm not going to fall on this one, because you're starting at the very maximum fall, right? If you're rock climbing and you're free soloing, each step gets more committing. But when you're steep skiing, you're starting at the top. If you blow your first turn, you're going to go the whole way. So a lot of times the first turn is the hardest one to make, and you just have to kind of you have to lean forward, which is very unnatural. You don't want to lean back when you're steep skiing. You'll end up on your tails. So you have to get out over it. You have to have it in your head. I can do this. I've done a million turns, and you just have to kind of make the first couple of turns in autopilot. And then all of a sudden it starts sinking in. You're just like, oh yeah, this is great. I'm up, I am in a crazy location making skiing turns down this thing. And this is super cool. And then, you're working your way down. And then once you kind of get past the point of, fearing for your life, you just start opening up and skiing down, and you look back on it. And it's like, yeah, there's a really cool big rad line with a set of tracks in it. And, the next snowstorm comes along and it's there for somebody else to do. So I like the mental aspect of it as much as anything. It's just really challenging.
And are you still
got to believe?
You got to believe, that's for sure. Are you still skiing lines as steep as when you were younger?
I pushed it for a long time, and now they have to be in perfect conditions. I think, when I was younger, I was willing to ski things in dicier conditions, or maybe not willing, I just didn't know any better. Now I still like them, but I'm much more like it has to be kind of perfect.
So you still have the appetite. When do you think the appetite will wane for you for the steep stuff?
I don't think it ever will.
I like that.
It's fun. It all depends. Steep skiing is, you can find something with a really safe run out that's, 200 feet long, or you can find something that's, super committing. But I'd say, a lot of it just depends on the situation, how you're feeling, what your motivation is. It helps if you do it a lot. Like if you're just always steep skiing, you come up and there's a 45, 50-degree slope, and you're like, whatever, you just have a lot more confidence. But, if you don't do it and then you get on a steep slope, you're kind of like, whoa, this one's got some spice to it. So, it helps if you do it a lot.
Well, that's great advice. Get out there if in working your way into it, obviously.
Yeah. Work up slowly.
Another stage of your life is ski guiding. You and I first met in either Antarctica or Svalbard, ski guiding together for ice axe expeditions, I think somewhere around 2014, which was an honor for me. And where and when did you start ski guiding?
I started as part of being an athlete for, Mountain Hardware. Sometimes they'd be like, we've got some dealers. We'd like you to take the dealers out skiing. And so you'd go skiing. Technically you're guiding, but it was more just, having lunch and having a good time. But I think probably with Doug, because I'd been on 2 trips to Antarctica. And then when Doug put together the Ice Axe Antarctica ski cruise, 2009, 2008 didn't happen. 2009 was the first year. And so that was really when I first started guiding, and my background on that was mainly that I'd been to Antarctica and I had, experience skiing in Antarctica, not necessarily, a lot of experience guiding, but it was pretty cowboy, back in the early days. And, then I started, working on my AMGA ski guide certification. And, just a lot of the skiing I was doing in the Wasatch, I'd, be out skiing and I'd just suddenly, be with a group of people and, they'd kind of be looking at me like, what do you want to do? And I was kind of accidentally guiding. And I just felt like I should get more serious about that. So, that's when I got my, woofer and started working on the AMGA cert and stuff like that. So that's how I got into guiding.
And when you refer to Doug, that's Doug Staup, the owner of Ice Axe Expeditions, where Andrew and I both work. And where has ski guiding taken you? Crazy
locations. I did a multi-million-dollar mega yacht up in Norway a couple of years ago. I did a private yacht down in Antarctica. I've been to Antarctica with you and Doug Staup probably 9 times or something like that. Svalbard with you, Morocco. Yeah, so all around the world.
Where's your favorite place to guide?
Antarctica, definitely.
Me too.
Yeah, it's just it's just so it's hard to put into words. It's just so good. The guiding in the Wasatch is really fun, and it's fun to turn people on. They come out and you ski powder, and they're just like, wow, this is incredible. Is it like this all the time? It's like, yeah, pretty much. But Antarctica is it's just, you got the wildlife and the penguins and the crossing the Drake, and it's really just turbocharged guiding, and you have 24 other guides from all around the world. So there's a lot of camaraderie and you meet interesting people, and it's just the ultimate trip.
I agree. It is the trip of a lifetime. We've gotten to do it multiple times, and it's just every time you go there, that every little part about it just absolutely blows your mind. So another big piece of both of our lives and a lot of our lives in the mountains is accidents in the mountains. And you've been skiing heavy lines for 30 years in remote places, and accidents have happened along the way. You've lost friends, as we talked about, and you've been very open about your challenges. I know you have a slideshow where you go through your mountain accidents, and I know that it's emotional. And, what types of accidents do you see out there, and which ones have affected you the most?
As I mentioned earlier, I've been directly involved with 4 fatalities. The first one was an avalanche burial with Roman Latta in the Wasatch. Then there was Alex Lowe and Dave Bridges in Shishapangma, Tibet. And then a friend, we were climbing Superior in the morning, dawn patrolling, and he fell off that and ended up dying. And all of those, especially the first one, I didn't know Roman very well. I just met him the day before. And the thing that really kind of came home to me was, you go out with people in the mountains and you kind of have a relationship, like a buddy bro ski relationship, pushing it in the mountains, doing fun things. But there's really a bigger, everybody has a family and friends, and that really comes home when you meet somebody's parents for the first time at their funeral, or you meet their wife or their kids for the first time, and just there's nothing you can say. It's just like, I don't know why we're doing this. It just seemed like fun at the time. I really regret it. All of the accidents I've been involved with, I never really felt like I was directly responsible. It wasn't like I said, you ski this. I'm afraid of this. Why don't you ski it first, type of thing. It was like it could have been me. With Alex and David, it was the luck of the draw that they were hit and I wasn't. With Roman, it just was the same thing. Dan Rector, same thing. I don't know why he tripped and I didn't. So, but it made me really think a lot more about people and climbing buddies. There's a lot more to it than just the climbing and the skiing. That's what's important to us, but they are people behind the whole thing, and they've got families, and you really need to keep that in mind when you're like getting to a situation. The adrenaline's high and everybody's pumped up. You need to be like, okay, let's keep it in perspective here. Let's calm down and really be a little more analytical about this.
That's all really great insight. And thanks for sharing that. I'm so sorry that has happened. And it's just so good to talk about it, though, and tell people these things, because we can all learn from it and get better from it. Roman Lata, is that the one? There's a famous picture of a guy jumping into Wolverine Cirque, and they say, this guy passed away. Did you take that photograph?
Yeah.
You did? Really? Yeah. Wow. Where is that? Somewhere in Salt Lake at a restaurant or something.
Oh, yeah. I gave away that was the only copy of it I had. It was an old 35 millimeter slide.
Wow.
I don't have a copy of it, but I would kind of like some copy of the image at some point. I haven't seen it for a long time. We made a large print of it and then gave that to the family and the 35 millimeter slide.
That's interesting, because that's what I saw. It's a large print. I want to say at a restaurant in Salt Lake, and it's very. I mean, it's giving me chills just thinking about it. It's very impactful, because that this was the last voluntarily thing this guy did with his life, and it's captured, and that was the last thing. It's making me overly emotional. We'll move on. But yeah,
I've always felt, a lot of the accidents I've been involved with, I'm more than happy to talk about them, because I feel that. They weren't done intentionally. There was no malicious on my part. As I mentioned, it could have been me easily. And I think it's important to talk about them so other people don't make that same mistake. I also kind of have a little bit of, the combat humor or
you do, and I love that about you.
Gallows humor, or, the humor like doctors and ERs. I mean, I'm willing to admit that skiing is not saving the world. It's a kind of a fun, frivolous sport, and if you really don't want to get injured, then the 100% safe thing is just not to do it. But if you're going to do it, I think you should kind of keep it in tongue-in-cheek perspective. It's not it is never 100% safe. Even if you are skiing super mellow slopes. I've had really mellow slopes rip out. So it's just something that you have to kind of accept. And personally, I kind of accept it, and with a tongue-in-cheek, sense of morbidity to it.
Well, and that's therapeutic, right? Laughter is a very common human reaction to terrifying, scary, sad situations. So I think that I like your attitude on that. I think it is a good way, a good therapeutic. And but I got to tell you how much that hits me that you took that photograph. Because I think about that all the time. I went out to Utah when I was very young. I want to say like 22, we went out there. My buddy pointed it out, showed me, talked about it. Anyway, crazy. One other thing I wanted to talk about is the explosive growth of backcountry skiing. So backcountry skiing and riding has just gotten huge in the past few years. What have you seen out there, and how do you feel about the growth?
I am just totally blown away by it. It's not so much anger, but just, in awe, because it's a tough sport. You got to break trail. There's a lot to learn, all the avalanche type stuff. There's a lot of gear to buy. And I just always thought, it's great. It's really fun. But, there's just like this many people, just a teeny amount of people. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, there are a lot of people getting into this. And it just seemed like, a couple of years ago, it was like, peak oil. It was like, oh, we've hit peak backcountry. But it's just gone just way up since then. And I just never, ever would have imagined that it would reach the popularity that it has. It's just phenomenal growth. Hard to put into words. When you show up at a parking lot in the Wasatch at 6 a.m. and it's full, it's like, wow, there are a lot of people getting after it. So, But, I like it. It kind of pushes me to go further and deeper and find other spots. And, I'm really excited to see people get turned on to it. I remember, some of my early days of skiing, you see people come back and they've only been doing it for, a couple of weeks or a month or maybe one season, and they're just totally gaga about it and, having fun and learning and skiing some classic lines and getting turned on to it. So I think it creates a lot of great backcountry ambassadors.
I agree. Yeah, it's such an all-encompassing experience, and you really are, like a little boat out on the ocean out there. So you have to take care of yourself, and also in that same metaphor, you are really exposed. You experience nature, you experience the wilderness, you feel it all happen. Where obviously at a ski resort, it's much more polished and pruned for you. And one other thing too, I wanted to hit here is you have been involved in conservation efforts, and that really matters to you, especially in the Wasatch. Can you tell us a little bit about your conservation efforts in Utah, what you're fighting against, what you're fighting for, what your level of involvement is?
I think, the Wasatch, what a lot of people don't understand is how incredibly small it is. Like when I first started skiing here, I was just like, wow, it's huge. But then as you start traveling around, going to, Montana, Wyoming, California, you realize that, Wasatch is teeny. Just a little teeny spot. And there's a lot of issues and there's a lot of pressure on it. There's ski resorts, there's heli skiing, there's tons of private property that used to be mining claims that are all scattered around. And yet there's just more and more people coming into the backcountry every year. And I think it's important to, realize that and save it, because it could be gone. It's public land. That there is a misconception that public land means that it's going to be, saved for the public. The Forest Service, who owns the majority of the land around the Wasatch, if they randomly decided to get back into mining or, logging, that's public land. It could be sold off. A few years ago, they were trying to sell off a big chunk to put a tram in. And I think it's really important to kind of hold on to these big chunks of land intact without, chipping away at the edges or cutting them in half and dividing them. And, just one ski lift here because, that one ski lift leads to another ski lift, leads to another this, leads to a day lodge, leads to an access road, leads to a closure. And, in the Wasatch, we just don't have that much terrain. So, every little inch of the Wasatch is kind of fought over. And, I think it keeps it the way it is.
Well, good for you. And it's good to really save these special places that we have left. There's not a lot of them. So I'm with you on that. So the final phase, which actually has been going on for quite a while now. What year did you get married?
Which time?
the second time. That second time. I forgot about there was a first. The second time. What year did you get married the second time?
See, that's a trick question there.
That is, yeah.
It's been 2005.
2005. So you're now married with children, and your wife at one time, or still is, the woman with the most vertical climbed and skied within 24 hours, Polly.
Yeah.
And you have two little girls, and by your words, two poorly behaved dogs.
Yeah.
So 2005, your family started, and how has that affected your decision making in the mountains?
Yeah, as I mentioned on Colbert, I'm a slow learner. What's really affected is just the spontaneity. When you have a family, it used to be like, Tetons are in great shape. Can you come up tomorrow for 3 days? I was like, yeah, that where you're able to ski steep lines as if you're able to kind of jump on them right away. But now, I still do a lot of skiing and trips, but I really have to plan for them ahead of time, or do, just a 1 day here, 1 day there type of thing. So kind of had to tighten up my program quite a bit. Really, it was like, oh yeah, kids, whatever, they're fine. I didn't, that's the amount of thought that I put into it ahead of time, but they take a lot of time and effort.
I believe that.
And, it's been great. It's really fun to see them learning to ski and growing up. And it's, I think there's this saying, it's something like the days last forever and the years fly by. It's like day by day, it can be pretty tough, but when you sit back and look at the big picture, it's really fun to go canyoneering or climbing or skiing with the kids and see them get turned on to it, and hear them complaining about what a rough day they had after going to Deer Valley and eating at Steins and then going to a hot tub and watching a movie. And it's just it's fun to see them experiencing it.
Good for you, and congrats on your family. I think that is such a great, it feels like everything's really come full circle and come together for you. And I love that. And that's all I got for you today. Do you have anything else you'd like to add here at the end?
Just have a great time skiing with you, Miles. Look forward to it. We have a lot of great memories from Svalbard and Antarctica. And I think I can't remember the turns that we made together, but I definitely remember hanging out with you.
That's where the memories really form. Drinking Fisk from Denmark, I think, with the clients.
Yeah, I've tried to forget that, but
yeah.
we had some good trips together, and I'm looking forward to doing it again as soon as possible.
Me too, Andrew. Always great talking to you. Always great skiing with you. Thanks so much for taking the time and just thanks for being here and giving us your life story. To learn more about Andrew McLean and to order his hilarious book, The Chuting Gallery, A Guide to Steep Skiing in the Wasatch, please visit straightshooter.com. That's StraightChuter.com. Thank you so much for listening to the Snowbrains podcast. If you liked this podcast, please share with your friends and family, and please subscribe. To find out more about Snowbrains, please visit us at snowbrains.com. You can also find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Snowbrains. This episode of the Snowbrains podcast was brought to you by Alta Ski Area. The editing of this episode was done by Robert Wilkinson. The music was created by Chad Crouch. I'm your host, producer, and creator, Miles Clark. Thank you for listening.